I heard about this guy who found a magic lamp and a genie popped out. And the genie said, you can make 3 wishes, you and your wife. And he thought, oh, this is great. So he says, all right, I wish that I was rich. And immediately he had $3 million. And he, oh, this is great. And then he said, well, you know what? I wish that I had a big, beautiful set of Sennheiser headphones. Bing! And he had a beautiful set of Sennheiser headphones. And for his 3rd wish, he looked at his wife and he said, you know what? I wish I had a wife 30 years younger. And they were both 60 years old. And bing! After that, he was 90 years old. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. That's what happens in Numbers chapter 14. The Israelites wish for something they shouldn't have wished for, but they wished for it, and they got it. Their rebellion against God. Let's check it out. Now in Numbers chapter 13, God had told them that they could check out the promised land, and when the 12 spies went over there, couple of them, Caleb and Joshua, they said, man, this is really great. God is giving us this land. But the other spies said, no, this isn't going to work out. The people are too big. We can't beat them. God can't help us. It's useless. We should just go back to Egypt. And that's how chapter 13 ends. And then you pick it up in chapter 14. That night, all the people of the community, not just some of them, they all raised their voices and wept aloud. Life is so hard. We weren't expecting to have to walk by faith. We want everything to be easy peasy. Verse 2, all the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron. They thought they were only grumbling against Moses and Aaron, but as we are going to find out shortly, when you grumble against the people God has chosen to lead you, that's the same thing as grumbling against God. The whole assembly said to Moses and Aaron, if only we had died in Egypt or in this desert. Oh my goodness, be careful what you wish for. We're going to get to later on in the chapter. That's exactly what's going to happen to a bunch of them. In fact, by the end of the book, that's what's going to happen to all of them, 20 years old and up. They're going to die in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? So they're impugning evil against God. Not only are they complaining against Moses and Aaron, they are speaking contemptuously against the Lord. That the Lord's intention all along was for them to die. Not only do they not believe in the power of God to deliver them, they believe in the power of God to harm them instead. How awful. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And then they said we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. So now this is just plain rebellion, rejecting the leaders that God has chosen, and instead they want to pick somebody that they like, the people's choice. Verse 5, how do Moses and Aaron respond to this attempt at mutiny? They fall face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Now, a lot of times in the Bible, falling face down before the Lord is a sign of reverence, a sign of worship. Revelation chapter 1, verse 17, John said that when I saw Christ, I fell at his feet as though dead. So, and then the women at the tomb of Christ in Matthew 28, they fell at his feet and grasped them and worshipped him. But sometimes in the book of Numbers, people fall in reverence and awe at the judgment of God and the stupidity of men. What are we going to do with this? That's what's happening here. They fall in front of the Israelite assembly. Verse 6, Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, they tore their clothes in grief. Normally in Judaism, you tear your clothing as a sign of mourning that somebody had died. Maybe they suspect that death is in the air, that people are about to go down, that they're about to die in judgment for their rebellion against the Lord, and so they're mourning the situation. They said to the entire assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good." So Joshua and Caleb are the only 2 out of the 12 spies that are still pushing to obey God. Verse 8, "If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us." If the Lord is pleased with us, I think that ship is sailing. I don't think the Lord is too pleased with Israel because they are rebelling again and again. I think Deuteronomy 1 says they tested God 10 times. I think this chapter is going to say that. Verse 9, "Only do not rebel against the Lord." I think that ship is sailing too. "And do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up." So that's what this whole thing is about. They have more fear than faith. They have more trepidation than trust. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Joshua and Caleb are preaching out of desperation, but also a sense of trust and hope and confidence in what God can do. But I think it's late. Verse 10, look at the response of the assembly. The whole assembly talked about stoning them. I think Moses and Aaron and Caleb and Joshua, their approval rating is even lower than President Biden's right now. It's like 2%. This shows you that approval ratings don't mean anything. You realize that? The only approval rating that matters is the approval of God. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. Oh boy. You ever been in a classroom full of kids that were acting up and all of a sudden the principal showed up? That's what's happening here. The principle of the universe is showing up, and the Israelites have to ask themselves, are we acting in a way that we're honoring the glory of God? I'm pulling out my phone because I have a very interesting comment that David Guzik makes about this. He says, "We are not yet told what the glory of the Lord would do, but it isn't hard to figure it out." Judgment. Their actions and feelings were not consistent with the glory of the Lord. Was it consistent with the glory of the Lord to be unbelieving? Was it consistent with the glory of the Lord to mourn because the walk of faith is hard? Is it consistent with the glory of the Lord to want to die in the desert? Is it consistent with the glory of the Lord to accuse God of plotting your death in the wilderness? Is it consistent with the glory of the Lord to reject God's leaders and go with the people's choice? Is it consistent with the glory of the Lord to threaten and kill those who call you to a deeper life of trust in God? Because it seems like the more Caleb and Joshua are pleading with the people to turn to God, the more the people are turning away from God, talking about killing the very people that God brought into their lives to help them out. And now God has appeared in his glory. Verse 11, he said to Moses, he's not talking to the people because the people they're not in good relationship with God. So God's talking to Moses. How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me? In spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them. You think about that. He did the 10 miracles in Egypt. He brought them out of Egypt through the Red Sea. He provided bread for them in the wilderness, provided for their every need. And now they are on the precipice of the promised land. The promises of God are there to be taken, there to be enjoyed. He's done so much for them. and yet they continue to speak of God with a contemptuous attitude of ingratitude. Verse 12, what's God going to do about it? I will strike them down with the plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. Remember in the book of Exodus, God made an offer like that to Moses back in chapter 32 when the Israelites were worshiping the golden calf, and Moses rejected it. He said, if you do that, Lord, then people will say you're not powerful enough. You're not great enough to do what you promised to do. You're not good enough or able enough to bring your people into the promised land. And again, God's making Moses a second offer. And I don't think this is a phony offer. I think God was ready to do it. I will fulfill the promises of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through you because the rest of these yutzes are disobeying and complaining. Verse 13, Moses said to the Lord, God, I'm not even going to think about that offer. I'm more concerned about your glory than my glory. I'm more concerned about your name than my name. Verse 13, Moses said to the Lord, if you kill them off and build your kingdom through me, the Egyptians will hear about it. By your power, you brought these people up from among the land of Egypt, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. And they've already heard, Lord, that you're with these people and that you have been seen face to face. Verse 15, if you put these people to death all at one time, the nations who have heard about it will say, the Lord was not able to bring these people into the land, so he slaughtered them in the desert. Verse 17, I love this. Now may the Lord's strength be displayed, just as you have declared. From Exodus 34, verse 6 and 7, Moses is quoting the Torah. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion, yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of the fathers, to the third and fourth generation. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. Moses is praying such a bold prayer. He's reminding God that he is forgiving, that he is gracious, that he is loving, and in accordance with his great love, forgive these people even though they don't deserve it, because you yourself said in your word that you're a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love. Wow, what a prayer. To me, this is such a pinnacle, pivotal moment of prayer, and it shows that prayer is not just going through the motions. Prayer is powerful. Prayer makes a huge difference. We're not always 100% sure how it works, because Isaiah 46 verse 10 says God declares the end from the beginning. He knows exactly how things are going to go down. But he also set up the system so that he would accomplish his purposes through the righteous prayers of his people. And we're seeing an example of that here, that God is responding to Moses. And then you look down at verse 20, the Lord replied, I have forgiven them as you asked. So it really was the prayer of Moses that made a huge difference here. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of the men who saw my glory and the miraculous signs I performed in Egypt and in the desert, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their forefathers. Just because you have the forgiveness of God doesn't mean there are not consequences from God for rebellious behavior. Look at David in 2 Samuel 12, after he said, I have sinned against the Lord. I have killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword of the Ammonites and have taken his wife to be my own. And he confessed his sin and God forgave him, but there were still mighty consequences for the rest of David's life for what he had done. Even today, somebody can commit a terrible crime and go to federal prison. They can be forgiven by God, but there are still going to be consequences for what they did for the rest of their lives. And that's what God is saying here. And if you read forward through the Old Testament and into the New Testament, the Bible writers never forgot this episode. Check it out. Psalm 95. I think it's verse 7 through 11. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the wilderness, where your forefathers tested and tried me, for they have not known my ways. Therefore, I said in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. And then Psalm 106, verses 24 to 27. Then they despised the pleasant land. They did not believe God's promise. They grumbled in their tents and did not obey the Lord. So he swore to them with uplifted hand that he would make them fall in the desert, make their descendants fall among the nations, and scatter them throughout the lands. And this is even remembered in the New Testament, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. We're supposed to learn from this. Don't rebel against God. Trust the Lord. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 9. We should not test the Lord as some of them did and were killed by snakes. And do not grumble as some of them did and were killed by the destroying angel. These things happened to the Israelites as examples and were written down as warnings for us, on whom the fulfillment of the ages has come. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. You know, we're capable of falling also. We're capable of complaining and conniving and acting contemptuously before God. And the entire biblical revelation is telling us about this so that we will not be like this, so that we'll repent of our contemptuousness and ask for God's grace and mercy and forgiveness, and that God would give us a different spirit. This whole thing about a different spirit is very important. Because let's look back here at Numbers 14, verse 23. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see the promised land. Verse 24, but because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. So out of the 12 spies, 10 of them aren't getting in, because they acted contemptuously and complained and rebelled. But Caleb is getting in because he has a different spirit. God, please give me a different spirit. Psalm 51, verse 10, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. But verse 25, since the Amalekites and Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea. So they're going to have to be in the wilderness another 39 years. 40 years total. 1 year for every day they spied the land and then disobeyed God. That's their punishment. And so they have to set out toward the Red Sea. They're probably going to have to go southeast from Kadesh, which is bordering the southern border of Canaan. And they're going to head back eventually toward Egypt. Be careful what you wish for. You said it'd be better if you died in the wilderness. You said it would be better if you were back in Egypt. All right. The judgment of God is on you. That's what's going to happen to you. You're not going to make it. Verse 26, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I've heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So remember, when you grumble against Moses and Aaron, you're grumbling against the one who anointed Moses and Aaron. So it's okay to disagree with your leaders and challenge your leaders and question your leaders. It's not okay to rebel against them and grumble against them. Yesterday, Jeannie and I were in Manitowoc, and we were headed back, and we were at a red light over by that busy intersection where you got the Walmart and the Festival Foods, and you've got Starbucks and Petco on the other side of the road. Well, anyways, there was a guy with a pickup truck, and he had a sign on the back that said, expletive Biden. And in small print, it said, expletive to those of you who voted for him. It's okay to disagree with President Biden. We talked about that already. I find many areas where I would personally have disagreements and ideological differences with this administration, but that's crossing the line when you curse the leader of your people, because for whatever reason, God has made it so that that person is in the position that they're in now. And so we are not to speak of our leaders with such expletives. And because of all the grumbling here, look at the judgment of God that's happening. Verse 28, so tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. In this desert, your bodies will fall, every one of you, 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me. So, be careful what you wish for. You thought it'd be better to die here? Guess what? You're going to die here. The only people getting into the promised land are the youth group. Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand, except for Caleb and Joshua. And then it goes on to say, verse 31, I'll let your children get in, but you're not getting in. For 40 years, you're going to be out here. And then verse 36, so the men Moses had sent to explore the land who returned and made the whole community grumble. Verse 37, these men were struck down and died in a plague before the Lord, the judgment of God. They got what they wanted. Of the men who went to explore the land, only Joshua and Caleb survived. And then verse 39, Moses reported this to all the Israelites. They mourned. And then the next morning they said, well, we changed our minds. We'll do what God said. We'll go up and take the promised land. And Moses is like, no, you're under the judgment of God. He's not going to be with you. Don't do it. But in their arrogance, in their presumptuousness, they still marched up toward the promised land. And the inhabitants of the land came down and beat them back all the way to the border in the land of Hormah. What do we learn from that? That we need to trust God, that we should not be speaking contemptuously and complaining about God or about the people that God brings to lead us or the people that God brings into our lives. When we're frustrated, we go to the Lord with our frustrations and talk to the Lord. It's okay to express your frustrations to the Lord, but it's not okay to take out your frustrations in a disrespectful way on the Lord. There's a big difference. And so I encourage you to pour out your hearts to God. Psalm 62, verse 8. And if you're watching and you're not a believer in Jesus, God wants to take you into the promised land. He has a plan for your life. Give your life to Christ, and you will be part of the Holy Land community forever and ever. You'll be with Christ here on this earth and be with Christ in eternity. Jesus loves you. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. God bless you. We'll be back tomorrow at Numbers 15.